So today I am joined here with Amber, and Amber, I am so happy that you are here with us. I know that what we're going to be diving into and talking about is going to be heavy and it's going to be difficult. And so I just want to prepare anybody who is watching and who is listening that this next series is going to be very emotional.
Yeah.
Because we are going to be talking about grief. And the women who will be coming in and sharing stories, it's going to be hard and it's going to be tough and it's going to be sad and we're going to cry, and I'm like already on the verge
Gave me tissues.
Yeah, of tears myself. But this is something that we have to talk about because so many women suppress their grief in this sense of, I just need to get over it. And we think we prolong it too much, or, I'm in this place and I shouldn't be here. We get upset with ourselves, or we just don't know how to process it in, I think, a way that is really healthy and beneficial, because we are designed to grieve. Otherwise, God would not have given us the ability to do so. So grieving is very helpful for us. We're just not meant to live there for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, and I do think that God specifically equips women in the topic of grief completely different than he equips men. Women have this perseverance. How many men have you talked to and you said, hey, who's the strongest person you know? And their answer is always, my mom.
Yeah.
Because she did this and she did that. And so I think that this is something that God has specifically gifted us to handle in a completely unique way.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're going to get to hear about that from you. We're going to get to hear how that has looked in your life. And so I'm not going to say anything because I just want you to share your story with me and with our listeners and the women out there. So however you would like to start off by telling us and just walking us through your walk and your experience with grief would be much appreciated.
Just dab my tear first.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I guess I can start by saying that Jeremiah and I met when I was 24.
Okay.
I was working in kids ministry at a church, and he was one of my volunteers. So we had one of those relationships that's makes everybody else sick because they're just too cute and all this sort of stuff. So we had a very good relationship, a very God-centered relationship. We met at church.
Right.
How could we not? And so our relationship was very quick in the fact that we met, we started dating, and within 3 months we were engaged. It was just a really exciting time. There was so much ahead of us. So we were just looking forward to everything. I don't really know exactly where to go from there, but God was just kind of teaching us what that looks like, because we'd never been engaged, we'd never been in a serious relationship with anybody else, and so God was just kind of walking us through what it looks like to be in engagement, how it looks like to prepare for marriage and have those conversations that you need to have before marriage, about kids and finances and faith and just all kinds of different things. And so we got married in July of 2015.
Okay.
I was 25 at that point in time. I used to give Jeremiah a really hard time because he was actually 9 years older than me. So he was 34 when we got married. I always used to tell him that he couldn't leave me for a younger woman because I was already a younger woman. So during his midlife crisis, he'd have to settle for a sports car. And he was very excited about that. And so, like most people, the first year of marriage is always so up and down. We had fights I never would have thought we would have had fights about, He would turn off the light in the living room because he thought it was too light in the house for me. I could read from the natural light, and just funny stuff like that. And so we were learning how to cohabitate.
Right.
And things were going really well. So in September of the following year, we decided that it was going to be a good time to start a family. And so we started trying to have a baby. Mm-hmm. And in October, Jeremiah went, sorry.
You do apologize at all. Yeah.
But, so Jeremiah went on an annual hunting trip. Mm-hmm. And it was supposed to be 10 days. And so he left on October 18th. And I was really nervous for him, nothing like 6 fairly mature adults, adult men running around the forest with guns. But yeah, so we kept in communication fairly often during the trip. It was just hard for him to text and stuff with the cell service, so I was already worried, if I hadn't heard from him. And on the last day of the trip, on the 28th, we were texting, and he had gotten an elk, and he was really excited, and I had actually just gotten offered a new job that would have changed the trajectory of my career path. I got offered this really prestigious job at CU for their fundraising department, and it was something that we had been working towards for a year. We actually got a bottle of champagne to celebrate our 1-year anniversary, which would have been in July, and we actually chose to postpone opening it until I got that job. And so that was something else. We were finally going to open up that bottle of champagne. And so I texted him probably around like 1 o'clock in the afternoon and was like, hey, are you guys on your way back? And I didn't hear anything. And I texted him again at 3 o'clock, and I didn't hear anything. And I was at work. It was a Friday. I specifically remember it was a Friday. And I got this call from one of the other men's wives. And she said, there's been an accident. Jeremiah is getting flight for life to Grand Junction. You need to go. And I immediately thought, oh my gosh, he's been shot. It's a hunting trip, he's been shot. Right. And so I ran over to my boss, was like, I have to leave, and I just ran out the building. I called my parents on the way, and I'm just driving, Grand Junction is 4.5 hours away. It is by the grace of God, 100% that I was not in a car accident on the way there, because, your brain is just going everywhere. I'm not paying attention at all. And somehow God delivered me there safely because
and you have no idea.
I have no idea what's going on. I got a couple of calls, one from the sheriff, but I was going through canyons and stuff over to Grand Junction, and so I knew that he wasn't shot by the time I got to the hospital. Okay. But I heard that there was possibly a lot of broken bones and things like that. He had been on an ATV, a side-by-side ATV, and there had been an accident. And so that's all I knew coming in. Okay. And it was one of those moments where I think God really put somebody in my life that I don't know her name. I don't know where she is. I don't know anything other than when I got to the hospital, a female chaplain was waiting for me. It was probably about 8 p.m., 9 p.m. by the time I got to the hospital. And when I ran into ICU, she met me. And without even knowing who I was, she identified me. And she was like, are you Jeremiah's wife? And I said, yes. And she said, I heard you were coming by yourself. And I didn't want you to be alone when you got here. My voice is so squeaky when I cry. It's okay. But yeah, so she immediately just jumped in and was one of the most supportive people I've ever met. She went from explaining some of his injuries to me to and this is where God comes in, because how is this the appropriate thing to talk about at this moment? But she literally told me, she goes, hey, people are going to tell you stupid stuff. And she literally just took that time to equip me with truth. And she said, people are going to tell you stupid stuff. They're going to tell you that everything happens for a reason and that God can only give you what you can handle, which ended up being like one of the two most common things I heard. Wow. And she literally said, this is why this is biblically wrong. This is why this is biblically wrong. So she equipped me with this truth that I got to hold on to for the duration of my life, the rest of my life. Again, I don't know what her name is. I only know that she worked as a part-time chaplain in Grand Junction.
Wow.
But she gave me those like swords, to fight lies. But yeah, so back to like Jeremiah though, from what I thought were going to be broken bones, he actually didn't have a single broken bone. He didn't have a single bruise on him, barely a single scratch, which actually drove me crazy because he looked perfectly fine.
Right.
But I found out that he actually had a traumatic brain injury. He had gotten thrown from the ATV, and they didn't know the extent of it, but later in that week I found out that he had what's called an axonal brain injury, which, like a normal concussion, you hit your brain, and that's the part that swells,
Right.
An axonal brain injury is where your brain twists inside of your skull, and it actually shears like brain cells and like separates pieces. And so it was very, very rare and very, very serious. The one positive I hold from that is like the doctors told me that if he had been wearing a helmet, the injury wouldn't have changed. So there's not like this what if,
Wow.
because it was a twisting force, not an impact.
Okay.
And so I was able to hold on to that. And I'm not sitting here being like, what if he would have done this differently? What if, But his friend that was in the accident with him looked so beat up. He was swollen and all kinds of stuff, but he just had this little scratch on his forehead, and he was fine. But Jeremiah just, had that bad luck. It's a very clear illustration of human fragileness. But yeah, so they told me that when he woke up, or when he was to wake up, that then they could assess how much damage was done to the brain, and that we would find out in a couple of days. Okay. But after a couple of days, he didn't wake up. And the way that brain injuries work is like you're supposed to make progression. You're supposed to like wake up, be able to talk, then be able to do motor functions. And Jeremiah was doing this. And so the more that gap got bigger, the less likely he was to make a full recovery. Okay. And the worse that prognosis got. My entire family was with me. His family was with us. Actually, one of the really cool moments was about 2 days into Jeremiah's hospitalization. I was convinced to leave his room. I wouldn't leave his room. And I went and sat in the waiting room. And I sat there in this chair, with my knees up. And I was looking around, and every single person from our wedding party was there. Not only between like the bride and the groom, but the people that you choose to stand up with you. Like the people that you choose to stand up with you are the people that like God has placed in your life to stand with you at the worst days too. And I thought that was just such a beautiful illustration of the friends we had been given. Yeah, it was a really cool moment to be like, wow, like this is the first time we've all been in the same room since the wedding. But they were there to support us.
So, well, during this time, you are basically living at the hospital, right?
Yeah.
And did they have a space for you there, right?
Not really.
Okay.
So there was like this little like concrete bench, like windowsill, that had like a little pad that you could, like it was just supposed to be like where somebody could sit. And so I slept there for probably the first like 4 or 5 nights.
Okay.
And I got so close to the nurses and stuff because I was there 24 hours a day. So a lot of the night nurses knew me, and they would sit, whether they were supposed to be working with Jeremiah or not, they would sit with me and just talk and hang out and answer my questions, because I wanted to know, and I wanted to understand what was going on from an academics perspective, on top of the emotional perspective, just understanding. But eventually the nurses snuck an extra hospital bed into the room for me to sleep in next to Jeremiah. And so there's a lot of stuff they snuck in for me.
That's so kind. So during this time, so you're in the hospital for days, and you have no idea what is going to happen. I mean, obviously you're being told, like, this is
serious.
Yeah, this is serious and extreme brain damage. So what is your prayer life looking like right now? How is God meeting you? What's going on there with your relationship with the Lord during this time?
I tend to be a person that actually, it's easier for me to go to God when things are hard versus when I'm celebrating. That's something I need to work on. But it definitely worked in this case scenario. And so, I mean, there were nights where it was just me. Jeremiah couldn't have any stimulation in his room, so there was no TV, no sound, no light. So I was in a very dark room for like 5 days. Actually, my mom asked me one time about something, and I was like, oh yeah, a couple of days ago the doctor said this, and my mom looked at me and she goes, Amber, you haven't been here for more than 24 hours. And it was just because so many people had come through that I just thought the days were passing, even though they weren't. But so a lot of the night, because I had to stay in quiet, was spent like in prayer, in communication with God. I'd even like sing quietly some of the worship songs that we played at our wedding. But yeah, so I just kept praying to God, like, if you want to make a miracle happen, like, we were very lucky in the fact that we had thousands of people praying for us. Like, we had friends from Afghanistan and Uganda and local friends, like, all sending us prayer requests or prayers and all reaching out to us. I mean, it was around the world. I used to joke that if healing only had to do with prayer, Jeremiah would have been awake, had me on his back and running back home the 4.5-hour drive. And so we just were very steadfast in our prayers for full recovery. We still at that point in time expected some sort of recovery, but probably around day 4 or 5, the doctors told us that after some of the swelling had gone down, they were able to move him more and do some x-rays that they weren't able to do before. And we found out that he had been paralyzed from the waist down, which is hard enough. But they also said that meant that he would never be able to have children. And that broke me because we were literally trying to get pregnant. And I knew that would affect him a lot. But I also knew like how hopeful he was and how faithful he was. And so we were, my family and I were talking about how even though this isn't like the way we thought God had our lives laid out for us, like there were so many options, Jeremiah was really big into fishing, and I was like, you can still do that in a wheelchair. There were just so many more plans, that we could still look forward to. But again, as the time went further and further on and he didn't wake up, the likelihood of his brain recovery kept getting smaller. So it went from discussions of, we'll not be able to have kids anymore, to Jeremiah won't be able to feed himself. Or even worse, he won't be able to talk. And that was hard for me for sure. I mean, doctors are wonderful, but some of them are not too socially aware. And so I had some very intelligent surgeons, but not very socially aware surgeons tell me things like, do you want to be a nurse for your entire life? Because that's the life that you're going to have. And they were trying to be helpful. They were not very helpful.
Right.
But like my prayers remained the same. I still prayed for like that full recovery. That internet story that you see when you're scrolling through of like the guy that beat all of the odds and made that full recovery even though nobody expected him to. And so Jeremiah had been on life support the entire time that we had been at the hospital. And on the 11th, 12th day of being in the hospital, so we'd been there for almost 2 weeks now, we were told that there was just no viability. And to be specific, I also found out that in that brain injury that his brainstem had been separated from his brain. So, but that was actually, as weird as it sounds, that was actually one of my prayers too. I had this horrible feeling earlier on in that week that like there were going to be some hard decisions to make. And so I prayed like desperately. Aside from the healing, I prayed desperately that whatever decision needed to be made, that it would be 100% black and white. I was like, God, I cannot handle a gray area. I cannot handle a what if. Like, you have to make this, and I like to order God around, like I have that, right? But I was like, God, you have to help me in this. Like, I just can't do it. And I was like, you have to make this so obvious. And then when we found out about the brainstem being separated, I was like, that's pretty obvious, and so after 12 days, I made the decision to remove life support, and they transferred Jeremiah over to hospice. And again, like, I still had hope that God would make that recovery. And that's literally just because he could.
Right.
Like, I knew he could. There's no, that's not too big for God. And so the entire time that I'm making all these big decisions, I was like, yeah, he could easily just like, you're good. Like, go be free. And so even when we were being transferred over to hospice, I was like, maybe this is it. Maybe this is like the time where now we're off life support. Right. It's completely up to God. Like, a crazy miracle could happen. And within a couple of hours of being transferred to hospice, Jeremiah had turned blue, which just meant that his oxygen levels were going down and his heart was beating slower. And so I climbed into bed with him, and I just laid my head on his chest, and I listened to his heart just beat slower and slower. And we had our entire family around us. And I laid there for 6 hours. And I remember within the hour that Jeremiah passed, I remember saying the exact prayer, which isn't actually, I don't know. You can pray however you want to, because it's not even a question. I was like, I just prayed, like, God, if you wanted to do something real crazy right now, this would be the time. Like, there are thousands of people watching this right now. And do you know how many people would come to you if they saw this story play out? And it's not that God told me no, but I feel like he told me, like, you don't know the plan that I have set before you. And so around 9 o'clock, Jeremiah passed away. I got to hear his last heartbeat, which I'll remember forever. But something that, sorry, I'm like all snotty.
Okay.
So something that was extremely impactful is, to me, was after Jeremiah died, I literally like rolled over the top of him and just like laid on top of him, and I was crying. And like at that time, like that's my lowest point in my life. And I can still hold on to the truth that like God is good. Then, like God is good as I'm laying over my deceased husband. You know, he's there. He's there with me. And yeah, it was just like my circumstance doesn't change who God is. Like there's no circumstance that we can have on earth that changes who God is. He doesn't change. And so, yeah, I mean, I got together with my family and we mourned together. And I'm 27 and now trying to figure out, okay, like I hated the word widow. I was like, I'm now a widow. Like, what do I do now?
Right.
And after, like the next day, we drove home, and I walked into our house, and the only thing that was different was that Jeremiah wasn't there. Like nothing else was different. And so I just tried to figure out, what does my life look like now? And I was laying on the couch. Let's be honest, I was laying on the couch a lot for a couple of months. But one of the times I was laying on the couch, I was thinking, I was like, man, like I really need to be like reading my Bible right now, or I need to be diving into something right now. And although that's like a noble thought, I just thought, because I don't have anything else right now to go on. And God stopped me. Like I could hear him in my heart go, you don't have to do anything. Like don't just do things. He goes, all you need to do right now is be in my arms, and that's it. And it was like at that moment that I have never felt closer to the identity of being God's daughter. You know, like when we're little girls and our heart is broken, like we just climb into our parents' arms and we just cry, you know, and our parents let us be sad. You know, they don't go, oh, well, you should go study or you should go do something else. Like that's not a thing. And so God was literally just telling me, like, just be in my arms and just cry. Like, just be sad. I'm here with you and I'm sad for you. And so you asked me previously, like in the other times that we've talked about this, like if I was ever mad at God. And I don't want to sound too like, I'm just so faithful, because that is not the answer. I was literally too broken to be angry. I didn't have the energy to be angry. I was just so sad and heartbroken. And so I was too wounded to fight. I do know other women since Jeremiah died that have talked to me about them being angry. And I prayed and asked God to like help me, you know, communicate with them, because I didn't have that. I was like, God, what do I say? And so he gave me the words, and I told them, you know, fight with him. Like, fight with God. If you're angry at God, fight with him. Like, in a marriage, if you're angry at your spouse, like, you fight with them, because that is a relationship. The second you are silent, that's when things start to die. And so if we're silent with God when we're angry with him, that's where that separation grows, not when we're angry with God. Like, that doesn't separate us from God. So if we can get through that with him and communicate exactly how we feel to him, even if it is angry. He's not going to be like, well, you're angry? Smite. Like, that's not a thing.
Yeah.
Like, he's not going to make things worse for you, or he's not rolling a magic ball just because you're angry with him. You can be honest with God and be sad or angry or happy or elated or thankful. Like, again, that circumstance doesn't change who God is. But I definitely felt a lot of pressure from the enemy.
Okay.
Again, another quiet evening laying on the couch before I was about to go to bed. I just heard this voice, and it was, are you sure God is going to take care of you? Because look what just happened. And I heard it so audibly, like in my head, that I actually sat up, and we don't understand how powerful the proclamation of Jesus' name is. But I sat up and I was like, are you kidding me? I was like, how dare you come into this house? I am God's daughter. You cannot say things like that to me. Like, get out of here. And I said that out loud, like in my house. And I think that there's so much power in proclaiming out loud. I mean, you're going to feel weird and you're going to feel like you're crazy, but like there's so much power in proclaiming your identity and God's power in a situation, and just not allowing Satan to trespass on God's property, which is you.
Heck yeah.
And and so, it was just taking a lot of small little swords, I think, God's little words of the sword of the Spirit kind of a things that really helped me survive those first couple months. And I was praying, asking God what he wanted my life to look like after Jeremiah died. And I just said, like, what is there a word I should be focusing on? I knew a group of friends that were picking a word for the next year.
Right.
And God gave me the word warrior. Which I just said I didn't have enough fight in me to like be angry. And God gave me the word warrior. And a lot of people go, well, you don't have to fight all the time. Like, you don't have to put on a front. And I was like, that's not why God gave me the word warrior. A warrior, yes, they put on armor and they fight, but they also have to listen to their commanding officer. Like, a warrior does not make decisions on their own. Like, everything comes from their commander. And a warrior has to know when to take R&R. Like, you need to know when to fight, and you need to know when to pull back. And I think that was a really equipping word, because there were a lot of times where it was like, do I push forward and fight and go to this event where a bunch of people are going to ask me how I'm doing? Or do I, retreat and just like have some time of solitude, not isolation, but a time of solitude with God to just be him and I. And so
That's awesome.
it was a great word.
I love that. That's just so telling of who God is, and that he receives us for exactly who we are, where we are. And if we are angry, he's not surprised by it. He knows we are.
Yeah, you can't hide that
No,
from him.
you can't hide anything. And instead he's like, just bring it to me. I know, get it off your chest. Just, you can dump that here. This is okay. I just think that's so incredible. And I love that. And I love, good for you for standing up to the enemy, because what a vulnerable place. And I feel like for women, we get into these very vulnerable places, and then we are so susceptible to the fiery arrows of the enemy. And it's, you could have easily just fallen into despair over that.
Yeah.
And been like, you're right. How? And that's his trick, over and over and over.
Yeah.
Is God really going to take care of you? You sure he really has your good in mind? So I love how you warriored up.
Yeah.
You totally did.
And the Bible doesn't promise that there won't be struggles. Like,
No.
The Bible promises there will be struggles. But what it tells us is that God will do everything for his good.
Yes.
You know, like what I said, that woman at the hospital told me that people will say stupid stuff to you.
Uh-huh.
And one of those things was God only gives you what you can handle. And that is so far from the Bible. That's like anti-Bible, which it's on so many things.
Everywhere.
It's on a pillow, it's on everything.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, life is too much for us to handle. Like, that's the point of Jesus. Like, if life was easy enough for us to handle by ourselves, we wouldn't need Jesus. So when we feel overwhelmed, when we feel grief, when we feel anger, that's okay. Like, that's what we're supposed to be bringing to Jesus. So I always that was a phrase that I was always on my milk box about. Like, my milk crate. Stop saying that!
Because you don't understand what is being said until you're in that situation and you're on the receiving end of it. And for people like us who aren't in that, you're trying to offer comfort.
Yeah, nobody had malintent saying that to me.
Right. It's just, what do I say? What do I do? Because it's uncomfortable for everybody. Because nobody knows, like, there's no, here's the protocol for when a woman is here and her husband, that doesn't exist. And so we're trying to offer comfort and we just don't realize what we're saying. Yeah. And it's the same thing. When you're on the receiving end of it, you're like, that's not helpful right now at all. That's not what I need. But I think that is a great conversation too for, like, what is helpful? You know, what is something in that moment? What are things that they did do that really did provide comfort? What was something that was helpful?
Yeah, so that's actually a question I get, and I love that people have emailed me or sent Facebook messages to me saying things like, my friend's husband just died, or my friend's wife just died. Like, what can I do? What helped you? And I love the fact that people are vulnerable enough and open enough to ask me that too. And I always tell people the same thing, like, anything. Like, the worst thing you can do is be so fearful of their grief that it's the paralysis by analysis. Like, you just don't do anything.
Yeah.
And so, inaction is the only thing that I would say that people shouldn't do. And that's anything from just go to their house and watch a movie. I mean, people experience grief in so many different ways, so it's hard to give specifics. Like, I didn't want to meet with women that were like me.
Right.
I was like, no, I just want to be like, but I would have coworkers come over and have lunch at my house while I was on bereavement leave, or it's still a mystery, but somebody sent me flowers 2 months after Jeremiah died on his anniversary, and I asked so many people, and I never figured out who it was.
Wow.
And I stopped trying to figure it out because I was like, you know what, maybe it's just the idea that, like, enough people are supporting me that I don't even know who this is, kind of a thing. But so anything between, like, making a dinner for them, like, eating was, like, out the window for me. I didn't have energy to, like, even, like, put together a sentence, let alone, like, make myself something nutritious. Yeah. I survived on, like, sugar and carbs for, like, months. I don't even know. So making meals, just being there, having conversations. I think one of the things that didn't help was, like, people that were like, oh, so are you going to start counseling now? And I was like, not the time for that. Yeah. Eventually, yes. But, like, let me just tell you how much things suck right now. Like, I had 2 friends that I could literally just text and be like, hey, I just want you to know, it sucks right now. And they'd be like, I'm really sorry. Not, oh, well, why don't you try this? Right. Like, it was just people that, it felt so comforting to just have other people know that I was hurting. Right. But something that I would recommend for other people too is put a reminder in your phone of that anniversary. So for me, it was like the 8th. And so for me, if that was my friend, I would put a reminder on the 8th because I'm sadly not good at remembering things. Right. And so on that 8th, I would shoot them a text message. Because you'd be overwhelmed by how much support people get in the first couple weeks, in the first month. And then those text messages, those phone calls start getting few and far between. And people tend to forget. I know they don't forget, but like you feel like people have forgotten. I remember being angry scrolling through Facebook after Jeremiah, like the day after Jeremiah's funeral, and seeing people that had been at the funeral like going to a game or going, and I'm like you guys just get to like move on with your life. And I wasn't mad at them. I was just angry like that, like other people were getting to move on with their lives. Like I couldn't, you know, my life was the same. Like it wasn't going to be as easy. So to be that constant person, I think is what friends would need.
Okay. That is so good to know. So we are now how many years?
November will be 3 years.
3 years.
So he died November 8th of 2016.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what is life like for you now?
Now, well, since Jeremiah died, God has really equipped me with a voice that I did not have before. Again, because so many people were supporting us, I all of a sudden ended up on this platform where people were watching me and waiting to hear what I had to say. And I'm not used to that. I was like the nerdiest, like nobody in high school. Like I tutored statistics. Like it was like, I always said that I had no friends in middle school, but at least I got paid to like do it in like high school or in college because I got to teach and all this sort of stuff. And so all of a sudden I had this like this platform, and so I was able to preach a lot of things that God was teaching me. And like kind of immediately, because nobody's gonna tell a sad little widow to shut up about her faith. Like I had free range. Like I could say stuff at work to like attorneys that I worked with, and I could just preach about like God's goodness. And you know,
awesome.
When I went back to work, like people were like, well, how can you even be here? Like how can you make a joke, or how can you be happy, or how can you be kind? That was something weird that somebody asked me. How can you be nice to me when you're dealing with this? And I was like, what do you think about yourself that I can't be nice to you? But I got to tell people about like joy versus happiness and the fruit of the spirits, and just being able to preach like my faith. And so that was my first year. I think a lot of my time and a lot of my effort was put into telling people about God's unconditionality. And then a lot of people think that after a year you're fine. Like, oh, you've been through all of the holidays, you've been through all of the anniversaries, like, so now you're good. And so there was a lot of pressure on me to date. And I just wasn't ready. And so I had been talking to God a lot about dating and the possibility of dating and what that would look like. And I grew up in a small town, so I don't even know how to date regularly, because I always knew their moms from like fourth grade and all this sort of stuff. And so I was like, I don't know what to do, God. Like, what do you have for me? Is this going to be my entire marriage story? Because God doesn't promise that if you suffer, you're going to end up on top, like within this lifetime. And so I was like, honestly, like that could be my only marriage, my only, you know, romantic relationship. And so probably around like January or February of 2018, I started playing around with the idea of, all right, maybe I should get out there, maybe I should try. When I was just too scared. You helped me celebrate myself a little bit by doing one of your last photography shoots.
Yes.
I felt so honored. And so I decided, instead of dating, that I was gonna try to get myself back together. And so I got a gym membership, and I pursued personal training. So I got hooked up with this awesome girl that knew my story and knew where I was at, because I had lost 20 pounds or something. I looked skin and bones. My muscles were atrophied because I wasn't moving a lot. And so the idea was to like get me back together and get physically stronger.
Right.
And of course, God has a plan. And I run into an old friend of mine from college ministry at the gym that first time I went. And I saw him every once in a while. And then it kind of dropped off and I didn't see him. And it was only at the gym. We talked for like half an hour. I didn't see him for several months. And I remember in the end of April pulling into the parking lot of the gym, and I just laid down my head and I prayed. And like, you talk about like a little high school girl prayer. I was like, God, will you please have Jim be at the gym? Like, I just really like him. And you know, again, I don't think this works, but I was like bargaining with God. I was like, so if he's there, I'll give him my number.
Here's my plan,
right? Like, come on, like, let's do this exchange. But you know, God likes us talking to him in even the ridiculousness.
Right.
And so, of course, I walk in there, and he's the first person I see.
Wow.
And so we had exchanged numbers. We started texting, and then we dated. We went on a date, and it went so well. And so we actually started dating. And again, like that voice that God gave me in my time of grief, like really helped in starting to date again. I was able to communicate like with him what I needed. I was able to tell him like, hey, I'm going to cry over another man. Like, is that okay with you? Are you okay with pursuing a relationship with somebody that's been married before, that's been on a honeymoon before, that's, you know, all this different stuff? And he thought about it, and he goes, you know, I think that's okay. You know, and we talked a lot about death and about new relationships and about my grieving process. And I was just so thankful that God put this man in front of me that was open and willing to allow me to grieve another man while pursuing him.
Wow.
Because a lot of men wouldn't be as secure to be able to have that happen. And Jim has told me that he prayed through our relationship and still praying through our relationship because he's in this grief process now with me. You know, he's cried with me about my experience in the hospital, about losing Jeremiah. And I told him he can't tell me like sweet things or I'm gonna cry. But he told me, he was like, yeah, like I just feel like Jeremiah did such a good job caring for you. And I'm honored to take the baton and keep going from here. And I was like, you can't say those things to me. And I'm like ugly crying in the car on the way to an event, you know, like, don't do this to me. And
at the same time, you're like, but keep talking.
Yeah, this is the sweetest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. And so we actually got engaged really quickly. And we were married this past May.
Yay.
And it's been wonderful.
Yeah.
We call our love God's redeeming love. And there's this big sign in the front of our house that says, God gifted me to you. Because we wholeheartedly believe that in both of our lives, he was grieving in a different way. You know, he was grieving a serious relationship, you know. But we just think that, like specifically for me, like my life was just like, it wasn't like I had a bad life. I still had a good life, even though Jeremiah had passed. But God was just like, you know what? You've been through enough. Here, just take this. Just be happy. Like, he made it so easy, which I was so skeptical about. I was like, it can't be this easy and actually be real.
Right.
But God was just like, God shattered my own, like, requirements of him, or however I want to say that, of it needed to be a certain amount of time, or it needed to be a certain amount of difficulties in a relationship before it was real. Oh, once you have your first fight, then it'll be real, and things like that. Like, God was like, why are you putting limitations on me on that end? Like, why can't it just be some fast, sweep you off your feet kind of love? Like, why can't I do that too? And I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah,
you can.
I'm cool with that. Like, let's just do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so I do think that losing Jeremiah, God gave me a unique set of characteristics after that that changed who I was, or changed who I am. Like, I would never appreciate Jim to the amount that I do had I not experienced the loss that I had.
Right.
And a lot of women ask me how I don't compare Jeremiah and Jim? You know, which is a reasonable question. Like, how do you not see your now husband as like second best?
Right.
Didn't you find the love of your life? And actually, the woman that asked me that was a woman that had lost her husband a month and a half before that.
Oh, okay.
And she was looking for answers. And I gave her some run-of-the-mill answer. I was like, I don't know, like, they're different people. And then I was thinking about it over the course of the week, and I actually called her. And I was like, hey, I've been thinking about what you asked me. Can I give you the real answer? And I said, it has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with me. I said, Jeremiah was perfect for me then. Jeremiah's death changed who I was. And Jim is perfect for me now. So there isn't a second best. There isn't a runner-up.
Right.
They're perfect for me in completely different stages of my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so good. That is so good. I love that. Because it is such a story of redemption, and it's so beautiful and just wonderful to, because I get to see it as well. But I love being able to celebrate that. So I guess as we kind of close this up, here's my ask of you. So here we are about to go into the holidays, or like we are in the holiday season. Everything is starting right now, which is when grief usually will tend to come back, especially if it's your first holiday without, and this person's not going to be there, or
especially with it focused on the family and all of the commercials.
It's supposed to be this warm, wonderful time of year, and loving your people and doing all of that. So if there's a woman out there listening or watching, and she's about to walk through her very first holiday, whatever that is, without, or in this place of just complete grief and thinking like this is hopeless and there is no up, what would you say to a woman who is there? How would you encourage her? What would be your words to her?
I don't think I would sugarcoat it at all. Like, holidays suck now. Like, they'll get better, but like this holiday is gonna suck. It sucked for me. Jeremiah died on November 8th. His funeral was the week before Thanksgiving. So like, I even have the anniversaries along with the holidays, which I know a lot of women actually do as well. There's a few, so everybody grieves differently. I read the top 10 things you should do when you've lost a family member over the holidays, and I was reading it and I was like, these are terrible. This sounds horrible. But to some women, so I'm not going to give examples because for some women that would be the way that they would. So I would just tell them what would be the best way for you to remember them? Would it be to just focus on the family that's there? And your family will be supportive. Over Thanksgiving, we didn't really celebrate Thanksgiving. We just sat there and cried, We had a meal.
Right.
But we were just together. And then there's other people that they like to have some sort of memento sitting at the table with them, as a sign of remembrance, things like that. Surprisingly, Thanksgiving and Christmas weren't the worst holidays for me. It was New Year's Eve. And that's because of what New Year's Eve represents. New Year's Eve represents the start of the new year and all of the possibilities and all this renewal. And I was so Scroogey. I was the humbug of everything. I was like, this sucks. Everybody else can dream up with these ideas. Tomorrow I'm going to wake up and my life isn't going to look different. And so my way of having a good night was not to go out on New Year's Eve with some friends. I ordered sushi and a pay-per-view movie, and I was really, my grieving thing was puzzles, because it gave your brain something to do. So I got a new jigsaw puzzle and I went to bed at 9. And it was just that was how I felt like I could celebrate New Year's Eve. I watched the fireworks, because I like fireworks, at 9 p.m. and went to bed. And it was just, there isn't really a cookie-cutter answer, but it's just try to decide something that works for you. But I do recommend people being around other family members or friends.
Okay. Yeah. And I love what you had said earlier, the difference between, solitude and isolation, because there is a distinct difference. So just knowing that, because I feel like this time of year would be such an easy time to slip into isolation and to retreat from everyone. So so good to offer
isolation
that.
can be so damaging. Like solitude is rebuilding and reviving. Isolation is digging a hole.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Amber. I appreciate, and I know so many women are going to, this is going to help them in so many ways, in ways they don't even yet know that they need that help. So thank you for your honesty, your vulnerability, and just for sharing that piece of your life with us.
Of course.
I know that, I know you, I love you, and now we have hundreds and thousands of other women who are going to know you and love you too.
Yeah,
and
of course.
so I can't wait for you to come back and be a part of this ministry in other ways as well. Yeah. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.